Hey everyone, History Mystery Man here, coming to you today from the home office. Got a really great show for you today titled The Legend of Big Bertha with Karl Kinser and Keith Ford. This is going to be good. At least a two-part series, maybe three. We'll see how that shakes out. Well, what was Big Bertha? Big Bertha was one of the most famous sprint cars across Indiana back in her day being the mid-60s, late 60s, early 70s. No matter who sat in this car, and there were a lot of great drivers to drive Big Bertha, no matter who sat in the car, they were eventually going to win. Probably its most famous occupant would have been a driver by the name of Larry Miller, who drove for Karl Kinser. Big Bertha was Karl Kinser's first real sprint car. Larry Miller drove for Karl Kinser in Big Bertha. There was a two-year stretch, and verified by Karl Kinser and Keith Ford, a 2-year stretch when Larry Miller won every race at Tri-State Speedway in Hobstadt, Indiana, late 60s, early 70s, and they were running every week. Their seasons stretched from April to October. Larry Miller and Big Bertha won every race at Tri-State over the course of 2 years except one. His numbers were very similar at Paragon Speedway. He was the king, especially in this car, but you know, Dick Gaines drove this car. Butch Wilkerson drove this car. Alan Barr drove this car. Keith Ford drove this car. Sheldon Kinser drove this car, and everybody won in Big Bertha. Well, what was the secret to Big Bertha? Well, as confirmed in the video you're about to see in this series, it boils down to a homemade fuel injection with a big 4-inch port and a big old single flapper on it, designed and built, invented by, guess who? Uncle Karl Kinser. Yeah, it boils down to that, but this car was absolutely famous, again, made most famous by Larry Miller, and if it gets restored, and we hope it does, we want to get it back to that Larry Miller era. I think that would only be fair. He won more races in Big Bertha than anybody. And as a side note, as Dick Gaines was the predecessor for Steve Kinser, Dick Gaines was Steve Kinser's predecessor in Karl Kinser's car, well, Larry Miller was Dick Gaines's predecessor driving for Karl Kinser. But anyway, as you may have noticed, I had done some features on Paragon Speedway. And in talking to Keith Ford, who owned Paragon Speedway for more than 30 years, you know, you begin to learn about all these little side stories. And I kept hearing about Big Bertha, the race car. And Keith Ford and I were having a conversation one day. I asked him, do you know where it is today? Is it still alive? Is it still around? He said, yeah, it's out in the chicken coop. I'm going, what? And the chassis, it's over here in the barn. I said, so you have Big Bertha? He goes, yeah, I bought it from Karl Kinser. And so we went and searched out and found all the pieces and parts to this thing, and we're putting this story together, and it's beyond cool. You're gonna absolutely love it. Welcome to the Legend of Big Bertha. Enjoy. Okay, the old doors off the old chicken house. Wow. Oh Lord, I can see the hood from here. Ooh, doggies. This was not part of the original adventure, but I'm very grateful it is. We are inside Bell Shepherd's old chicken house, along with the critters and whatever else is back here. Here we go, we're past now. Wow, I can see it. This is an iconic race car, parts of it anyway. That's where the 11 came from on Karl Kinser's cars. He said, well, 11 is twice as easy as 22. I'll just cut it in half, and the numbers are a lot easier to make, and so 22 became 11. That was the story he told. Two tail pieces.
Here's a metal tank.
Metal tank?
That Karl built. They used to have 100 lappers and 150 lappers.
Yeah.
We did.
And running that big block took a lot of fuel, so he built a metal tank that I'm not sure how much holds. Well, it holds 40 to 50 gallons. And for the big races, you hang that tank on it.
Wow. These are some iconic pieces here. So we've just pulled the 22 tailpiece off and uncovered a 1. What are we looking at?
Back when Sheldon Kinser drove for Grant King.
Yeah,
Car was red.
always Grant King
and
cars.
number 1. And Grant King give me that. There's been some museums want that
I'll bet.
since it was Shelton Kinser.
Yeah. There's your chicken feeder. There's your, you put your corn in there.
Put your corn in there.
There's your chute. You would put your bag under it to
Collect the corn.
get your chicken feed.
His original.
That's a wooden wing that says 22.
Yeah.
That's wooden.
That's
Sure
metal.
is.
That's a metal.
That's a metal tank.
It's
Yeah.
original.
That's the original 22 tank off of Old Bertha.
Yeah.
So you've got all the pieces and parts here.
Big Bertha.
Big Bertha. What did I say? Old Bertha? Big Bertha. I gotta get that right.
His front wing.
Yeah, out of wood.
Out of wood.
Plywood.
Homemade.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
One above it, that's a top wing.
Top wing.
It's built out of galvanized.
Galvanized, yeah.
Galvanized sheet metal, and then the sides are built out of plywood.
So Bell Shepherd's Chicken House holds a lot more secrets than just black snakes chasing chicken eggs. Oh man,
Wait a minute.
I'm seeing all kinds of yeller up there. Treasure trove of secrets in Bell Shepherd's Chicken House.
But that's,
Well, the first floor wasn't quite good enough, so now we're going upstairs. Got the old ladder out, and you're clearing away the brush for me. Clear the coons, and I'll be up. There's 2 up, 1 more to go. Why do I do this stuff? Wow. Upstairs at the chicken house. Ed had his distill up. Is this where he, what'd you say, Rick?
Still, yeah, this is where the still was.
This is where the still was?
Off season, yep.
Off season.
Yep, you bring it in this back door back here.
Yeah.
Covered up here. This
Uh-huh. Yeah, this is the nose piece here. Wow. That's the hood off of Big Bertha?
see if you can grab it, both of it.
I can.
Amazing. Now there's some history.
Wow.
The original nose,
And
hood,
and cow.
and cow, Big Bertha.
Big Bertha.
I could, the way you laid it out, I can picture that car sitting right there.
Probably the original seat right there.
That's the original seat to Big Bertha? Holy Toledo. In the restoration process, I assume it would be that seat that would go back in?
Probably should, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Now there's some history there. Think of the men who saddled up in that. From Dick Gaines to Larry Miller to... I feel like the
This rock,
American picker of motorsports here.
this is a rock screen that went in front of the driver, and it
Oh, okay.
fastened to the roll bar, in front of the roll bar.
So that kept rocks out of his face.
Yeah. That's original.
That's original, yeah. That's so cool.
Close it up.
And there's one of Bell's original chicken coops. Now a support for his old sprint car hood. Back on the ground. Whew, that was brutal. That was cool. Will you look at that? Studebaker. Hello there. How are you, sir?
I just went and washed the Studebaker. I guess we'll take it at the car show tomorrow.
Oh, I tell you what, that's one of the most beautiful cars I've ever put my eyes on.
Just a damned old Studebaker.
God, it's beautiful though. I mean, the black and gold.
Yeah, it is.
That is sweet.
She is a pretty nice old boat. But anyway, we had the boys from Columbus build that frame, and
We're talking Big Bertha now, right?
yes, and Leon said, "Well, I can tell you one thing from racing. My experience, there's no substitute for cubic inch. So this is when they come out with the 396 and the 427, Chevrolet did.
Mm-hmm.
So we built the car with a lowered frame rail so we could put the big block in it. And we put that big block in it, and I bought a brand new set of Hilbert fuel injected for the engine. Well, I think it's probably the first set they'd ever built, and that thing, we'd go to the racetrack and it wouldn't shut off. On a short track, if you can't decelerate, it's about as important as accelerating, because if the motor don't shut down, it pulls you off in the corner. You got the brakes hot, you can't stop, and wears the driver out, and he's a cussing and a raising hell. So anyway, I took them brand new injectors off and built just a one butterfly pot that went on the stock Chevrolet manifold,
I saw it.
and that thing worked perfect. Larry Miller at Paragon and Evansville was unbeatable. He won, I think, it's every race for 2 years except one at Evansville.
That's
And
amazing.
It is.
That's amazing. You know, it's funny because Keith Ford and I spent an afternoon pulling out body parts from old Big Bertha and moving them to a more secure location. But the one thing that stayed in his house was this homemade fuel injection you're talking about. He kept that
Yeah.
in the home. Nobody's going to get that. He showed it to me. It's got a big, giant port with a big old flapper on it.
Oh yeah, 4-inch butterfly.
Yeah.
Well, and we got to running so good with that big block. Diz at Mitchell, Diz Wilson, he put a big block in his car, but he bought fuel injection for it. Well, Sheldon Kinser tried to drive it, Dick Gaines, Calvin Gilstrap, 3 or 4 other ones, and nobody could ever get to going in that thing. But what it was, I knew what it was, because you couldn't shut off to go into the corner. It'd pull you off into the corner. And if the rear wheels are pulling, you can't get kind of hung out to make a short track good lap. You know, might make 1 out of 15, go off the bank on the other ones.
Well, was that the secret then to Big Bertha, if there was one? Because you look down through its history, whether it was Alan Barr in the seat, or Larry Miller, or Dick Gaines, or Butch Wilkerson, it didn't matter. They eventually got to victory lane. They won in the thing. Was it the big block horsepower with a big old fuel injected flapper, or did that chassis twist just right, or what was it?
The engine and the fuel injection we put on it.
Yeah, you think that's the biggest secret?
I know it was.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we fought that thing for 2 or 3 months, couldn't hit her behind with both hands, and we built that, and Larry Miller kept saying, I'm telling you, this thing won't shut off. He said, you can't get into the corner with that thing running half wide open. That blood machine, you're going to go off the end or turn over.
Yeah.
So anyway, we finally took heed with what Larry said, and we made that pot for that thing, and boy, it's victory lane from then on.
Yeah.
It had a 454 motor in it, and the rest of the guys around was running 283, 327, 350. You know, we had 150 cubic inch on them. If you got on a racetrack, any size at all, I mean, it was just embarrassing for the competition.
Yeah. This is your little office?
Big Bertha.
Big Bertha. Larry Miller.
That's a oil painting. Carl said, you got the car, you might as well have the picture.
What about that trophy?
The last race held
On the half mile?
half-mile speedway at Columbus, Indiana.
Oh, really?
1972.
Last sprint car race held at Columbus Speedway, won by Alan Barr, car owner Keith Ford. It beat both of Karl Kinser's 2 new cars.
Right.
With Big Bertha.
Yes.
Okay, so this is, I get the connection. That's a Big Bertha trophy.
Yeah.
The last one to come out of Columbus Speedway, Indiana.
Oh, yes.
And this is what lived on Big Bertha?
Yes.
Really?
The reason for it was a regular, all the normal fuel injection, Hilburn mainly, that most people run back then and run today. The butterflies would stick. 8 individual stacks on the engine, and the butterflies, which is what this is, but
Right.
All 8 cylinders had its own butterfly, and the housing would warp due to the heat, and the butterflies would stick and hold the engine wide open or half open. But anyway, haul it down the corner, and it just wouldn't let off. So Karl come up with this design. Just one of many of his
Inventions.
and designs. And
Well, this is a perfect example of the innovator in Karl Kinser.
a guy named Galen Fox.
I know that name.
He's Grant King's chief mechanic in
Yeah.
500, and they also run championship dirt cars.
Right.
And Galen come down to my shop, my garage, because he wanted to study this. And we was good enough friends that I allowed that. I didn't let too many people study it and look at it, but I let him, and he built one on a tunnel ram manifold, and he had 2 of those pots on it. Smaller in diameter, but he had 2 of them. He run them for years, and several people copied it. And the corporation, Crowder Fuel Injection, they built, they made cams and fuel injection systems, and I don't know what all. They called me one year. They was at the National Drags in Indianapolis, and they called me and wanted to know if they could come down and look at it. And I said, well, what's in it for me?
Oh,
They said, well,
$1 million question.
We said, we won't know until we see it. And I said, I don't think so. I don't sound like a good idea.
So they never got to peek at it.
And they never got to peek at it, but they did try to duplicate it. I don't know how much success they had with it, but like a lot of other people, Earl Gertie, a famous engine builder, he's now deceased. I did let him look at it, and he copied it. And from what I understand, some of the Outlaw Boys, World of Outlaw Boys, will run the system.
So Karl never held a patent on this thing?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
I don't think he got a patent on anything.
Yeah, I think he did.
signed it.
Yeah,
And everybody copies him, you know.
sure.
Like you said before, if he put Kelviner on the hood of his car and won a feature, then the next show everybody'd have it. This is true.
That is so true. So you may have already explained it, Keith, but so you can buy this,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But what is uniquely Karl Kinser about this thing?
Well, all this machining, building this housing for this butterfly,
Mm-hmm.
like a helmet injection, having 8 stacks with butterflies in them. He just got this one, and it's synchronized through the fuel system. This is a metering block. It's all synchronized air due to fuel. You know, it has to be. Here's an adjustment for it. It all has to be adjusted properly, and fuel inlet here in 8 lines, which line for each cylinder.
How did he come up with all this stuff?
don't
Where does
know.
it come from?
Probably laying in bed at night thinking.
Yeah,
Studying.
I guess so.
One thing nice about it, most injections, you can feed them too much fuel, and if you run too low RPM, they'll load up.
Yeah,
Then when you go to accelerate, they got to spit and sputter before they take off.
I got
This
you.
thing here, you can ride the brake and get it down to almost a mile an hour and stand on the accelerator, and it's off like a rocket.
How much do you think this fuel injection homemade design by Karl Kinser contributed to the success of Big Bertha?
All of it, I'd say.
That's a lot. Wow.
Fuel.
So if Big Bertha is restored, I got to believe that fuel injection needs to go on it
Yes.
as an original component. You know what I mean?
Definitely, yes.
Part of the personality of Big
Yeah,
Bertha.
yeah. Well, when I bought the car off Karl White, it had it on it.
Do you think he'd have any interest in bringing back Big Bertha to its original glory? I know it's an enormous project, and you're all are getting up there in age. I am too. I get it, you know. But I don't know who would do it, could do it, but it seems like a project worth pursuing for the right person who's got the energy and the gusto and the time to do it.
I've got some feedback from some friends of his and family members that he's interested in restoring it, and this one family member told me that Karl told him if he could get it bought, he would help him restore it. But I really don't want to sell it. If I sold it to anybody, it'd be Karl.
Of course.
I don't really want to sell it, but I'd like to see Karl take it and restore it.
He'd be the guy to do it.
But I don't know if he would do it without owning it. And I just, at this time, I just don't feel like letting it go.
Yeah.
So the old car got my hand one year.
Yeah, I know. It kind of crushed your hand, didn't it?
It did. Yes, it did.
Well, I mean, and there's lots of cool stories that come out of Big Bertha 22, not only for the innovation that went behind that machine, the Karl Kinser in it, but the men who drove it. I mean, the list is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, and not just drove it, but they all won it.
Let me get the list.
Okay, get the list.
I had in it.
Okay.
Here it is, right here. No, this was after I purchased it in '72. That trophy you're seeing in there really was the first time I had Bertha out.
Mm-hmm.
And let Alan Barr drove it, and he won the feature. And he won 3 features in that car in '72. Then another driver, of course, that I had in it was Larry Miller. Dick Gaines, of course. Okay, another driver was Mike Johnson.
Yep.
Sheldon Kinser.
Wow.
Tom Bigelow.
Nice.
Johnny Krebs. And Butch Wilkerson.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal list. And for those that were paying attention to sprint car racing in the 60s and 70s, specifically around here, those are names that are special. And I can just see this thing getting restored. I mean, there's so many great stories that come out of it, not for just for the drivers, but you know, that's where Steve Kinser, his iconic number 11, grew from Big Bertha, because Karl Kinser finally came to the idea in his head that painting, back when they painted all the cars, you know,
Right.
painting a 2 was way harder than painting a 1.
Yeah.
So he said, heck with a 22, I'm going to cut it in half and just make little strips. It's called number 11. The 11 was born in the 22 of Big Bertha.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's a fact. Carl told me that.
I had never heard that, but
Yep.
I believe it.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's hysterical. Well, man, thanks for showing me the original Karl Kinser fuel injection on Big Bertha. This will make a nice little piece in the feature. Very cool. Horsepower history there.
It's hard. It'd be hard for anybody to duplicate it just by looking at it, because there's a couple things that's secretive on it.
Yeah, but even for my simple mind, you say all these secrets, but part of its secret to me is its simplicity. One big giant port, I guess.
The old saying is keep it a kiss.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Don't fix it if it ain't broke.
Right.
Did you just, you know, grow beyond that chassis, that race car? You had to keep up with technology and move on, or I mean,
Well,
why did it leave your stable?
That's a good question. My wife still don't know.